Good morning, YouTube. Welcome to the Reptile Barn. Just a quick video. Well, I've kind of got this on my mind. Oh, see me in the window back there. I'm standing in the Sailfin room, and I wanted to talk about this idea that I have been questioned on pretty severely. So I'm just going to get right into it. We have always bred Philippine sailfin dragons here at the Reptile Barn. That is Hydrosaurus pustulatus. A very close relative of those are, you can't see because her lights are already off. I apologize. Yeah, you can't see anything. There is a Hydrosaurus amboinensis female in this enclosure right behind me. Our first sailfin that is not pustulatus. And until we get a male amboinensis, which we're going to do, we are going to breed one of our male pustulatus, I think you can see his tail there, to the female amboinensis. Sorry, I keep showing you as if you can see anything. Their lights are all out. That's the plan. And that's going to produce hybrids, right? And the whole idea of hybrids is pretty contentious in the reptile hobby and the whole animal breeding world, really. So I want to talk about why am I okay with doing this, so that at least if you are upset with me for doing it, you can be upset for the actual things that I'm doing and my real opinions, and not just what you may have read online from other people. So first off, what is a hybrid? It seems pretty straightforward at first, but I don't think it is. Really, you're just saying a hybrid is the product of two different species. So in this case, I would be breeding an ambon sailfin to a pustulatus, right? A Philippine sailfin dragon. Well, what's a species? I don't want to get too deep into the weeds in this video, but a species is unfortunately not as straightforward a concept as we sometimes present it. So there are a bunch of different ways of deciding what's a species, what's a subspecies, what is a locality, what's too broad and general, so we need to just lump it all into the same genus, and then a family, and it just goes up and up and up, and they all fall under the animal kingdom, right? Well, a lot of people will say, well, if they can breed and produce viable offspring that are fertile, then they're the same species. Well, okay, by that definition, then my ambon sailfin to a Philippine sailfin is not hybridizing, because they're going to be able to produce viable offspring that are perfectly fertile. In fact, that are potentially a lot more fertile than many, if not most, of the captive sailfins that are already in people's collections, because there's going to be a lot of hybrid vigor. They're not going to have any inbreeding issues whatsoever. So by that definition, these aren't going to be hybrids at all. And anyone upset with me is going to have to come up with a different definition for what a hybrid even is. The level of genetic relatedness is a relatively newer way of deciding what species are. Looking back in kind of the evolutionary tree using cladistics, again, I don't have time in this one video to go into all these concepts, but what is the nearest common ancestor can often be a way of at least helping determine, are these the same species or not? But that starts to get really sketchy too, because by some of these definitions, a polar bear and a grizzly bear are the same thing. A polar bear could be thought of as a white grizzly bear that likes to swim more and eat seals, right? But regular people and scientists, like, no, of course they're different species. Why though? So then we start to, as visual people, humans are very visual. We want to look at morphological features of an animal and say, these are clearly different animals, right? In the case of these bears, right? You'd be surprised looking at their skeletons that they're actually very, 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 very similar, and that we're mostly actually just looking at colors here, but we do that a lot. Look at the tree monitors. That's another group of animals that we love here at the Reptile Barn. Black tree monitors, blue tree monitors, green tree monitors, yellow tree monitors. These are all cordensis. There's a bunch of animals in that clade, right? In that complex, we might call them in the reptile hobby. We like that word. That are pretty much the same thing, but different colors. A tiny variation in size. But they're all from Indonesia. They all eat the same thing. They behave the same way. They're the same shape. Their care requirements in captivity are exactly the same. They breed the same way. They're the same thing, just different colors. And yet, they look so startlingly different because of the vibrant color differences that we say they're different species. And there's geographic differences. Blue tree monitors, that's Varanus macraei, they're only from the island of Batanta. And something like the green tree monitor, Varanus prasinus, is more widespread in Indonesia. So there's things like that. But why did scientists decide they're different species? I'm not saying they were wrong, but you start to understand that this is a very man-made concept. Evolution doesn't care what we say is a species, right? That's just not how it works. There aren't these easy determinable boxes that evolution puts each species into. They're always changing and shifting. What if, 500,000 years from now, a population of blue tree monitors managed to make it to a different island, and they started to change ever so slightly to a new color, and all of a sudden there are purple tree monitors. Well, at what point in this change do we say, okay, now they're a different species? If 50,000 years have gone by and they're only like barely a different shade of blue, okay, no, they're still the same species. But then another 50,000 years go by and they've kind of changed a couple more shades and they're more of a purpley. Are they now a different species? What about another 100,000 years? At some point they're different enough and they haven't interbred with their original population in long enough that we just say, okay, now it's a different species. But we come up with that distinction. If somehow something happened, a hurricane blew them across the water and they kind of mixed back together, well, now they're the same species again. Anyways, I'm getting way off track here, which I didn't want to do. But it's kind of important for us hobbyists to realize before you go trashing someone for hybridizing, make sure you at least know what you're talking about. What even is hybridizing? So, let me get into, very briefly, what I feel is the main reason that it makes people mad. And this comes from a good place, which is why I want to address it. I don't want to just blow these people off and ignore them because this concern comes from a really good place. There is a concern about conservation, where if you take a species that is relatively rare in captivity, or in the wild, or both, and you hybridize it, those animals are forever useless in a conservation capacity, at least as far as, being potential animals that could help reintroduce the species back into the wild. So you'll have these projects. This happens in the United States a lot, and a lot of other countries do this too, where they realize that the problem isn't really with the animal. The problem is that we've done something bad to their habitat. You know, we talk a lot about deforestation, but things like roads crisscrossing their habitat often are just as destructive, because we don't think of it as, oh, there's this giant forest that's still perfectly good, but to the animal, it's only teeny tiny little parcels of usable habitat now, because the roads are a real menace, and many animals aren't going to cross them, or are not going to cross them successfully. So there's just things that we don't think about all the time. The animal is struggling in captivity, or I'm sorry, in the wild. We fix it. We do something to improve the habitat, and now we're ready to kind of reseed that species in their native habitat. And a lot of reptile people are very aware that this happens, and they're like, but your animals are now useless. You can't do that. Or even just wanting there to be pure postulatus or pure amboinensis, even just for the sake of captive populations. This makes people very mad when breeders are hybridizing their animals. So all I would say to that is, first, unfortunately, us regular hobbyists and breeders, even very serious breeders, our animals will just simply never be used for reintroduction into the wild. They will not be used. No conservation scientist worth their salt is going to just go to private hobbyists and be like, hey, if you're willing to work with us, we'll take 50 of your captive bred babies and put them into the wild. That's not going to happen. It just, with very, very, very few exceptions. If you are not, you know, with a really, really successful like NGO or a university or maybe a accredited zoo, your animals will never be used for that, no matter how perfect and pure lines you have maintained. There's just no regulation on these hobbyists. You know, you can say that you've had great bookkeeping and that you understand your different genetics and your lines that you've had, but how do the scientists trust that? They can't. And having bred these animals in captivity for many generations, often they become less wild quality. They're not going to be as successful. You know, there's reintroduction projects happening with eastern indigo snakes right now in the southeastern United States, and it is a serious amount of work to make sure that these snakes that they're using to put back into some of these places are gonna make it. They do a soft introduction first before they actually fully release them in a hard release. It's a pain, and they cannot just go to an eastern indigo breeder. They're not going to go to Black Pearl Reptiles and be like, hey, can we buy 50 of your snakes and release them into Georgia or whatever? That can't happen. So as much as it pains me and many others, our animals are useless for that particular part of conservation. Doesn't mean they're useless for conservation, but for reintroductions, they really are useless. So whether they're a hybrid or not doesn't matter in that way. As far as just wanting pure lines in captivity, I agree with you, which is why we are fully dedicated to getting a male so that we can produce pure amboinensis sailfins, just like we're producing pure Philippine sailfins. There's very few people doing it, and we want to be one of them. And as soon as we can, we will. But in the meantime, our female is cycling whether she's bred or not. She is using up her energy. She's laying eggs. They're just not fertile. Why not produce some really beautiful pet lizards that will be sold and marketed as pet only? These will not ever be told to anyone that they're pure amboinensis or pure postulatus. These will be marketed and sold as hybrids. And having more sailfins of any type out there in people's collections is a good thing. Raising awareness and getting people to like these animals will help them so much more than almost anything else we as hobbyists can do. You know, there's kind of a general rule of thumb in conservation that if people don't love it, they will not conserve it. They just won't. Which is why it's so much easier to find conservation dollars for a tiger, right? Or a bald eagle. These iconic animals, typically mammals and birds, that people like, or the babies are cute, or they're large and powerful predators, or whatever the case may be. It's pretty easy to get dollars for those animals. For a snake, not so much. So the more of them out there that people can see in person, realize how beautiful and fantastic they are, and grow some appreciation for them, that is how we can contribute to conservation. So until I have a male Amboinensis, I'm perfectly happy to breed this female as long as I am crystal clear that the babies are hybrids. And my main thrust as far as producing more of these will absolutely be for pure species sailfins. Once I'm able to do that, I'm not going to be making a bunch of hybrids anymore. I just won't, because I'll be much, much, much more interested in breeding pure Ambons, pure Philippines. Eventually, we want to get Celebensis, which is just another species of sailfin dragon. So that will be more exciting for us and more important as far as having the distinct species represented in captive collections than any hybrids we produce. But I don't think it's unethical to produce hybrids. I know that no matter what I say, I could explain myself for weeks. Some people, doesn't matter what I say, my words are going to go in one ear, out the other. They're still going to be mad. And that is okay. Don't buy them from me, right? But I just wanted to make this video so that at the very worst, people will be mad at me for what I'm actually doing, what I actually believe, and not just projecting something that I don't actually think, right? So, if any of this wasn't clear, I'm happy to talk further with people about it and clarify. This video got 5 times longer than I intended. I don't know if anyone's going to listen to the end, but at the very least, my opinion is now public. I put it out there, even if no one ever watches it. I did my best to explain myself, and that is why we are going to be producing hybrid Philippine and Ambon sailfins in the future. So that is all, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I know this was long. If any of you actually listened to the end, then you must be pretty interested in this topic. So good job. Until next time, we are the Reptile Barn.